Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to literally unpack the invisible architecture of poetry. We're going to discover exactly how simple, everyday words on a page are transformed into these vivid emotional landscapes that just stick with us long after we finish reading them. I am so incredibly excited to guide you through this today, because honestly, understanding how a poem is built from the ground up completely changes how you experience it. So have you ever been to the Philippines? That super evocative opening question comes straight from Georgia Liana Benedictos's poem, Philippines, the place you'd love to be. And it instantly grabs our attention, doesn't it? It proves that poetry is so much more than just boring text on a page. It's an imaginative awareness of experience. It's a way of sharing a very specific vision of the world. But how exactly does a writer actually achieve that effect?
Well, to answer that, today we are opening up the ultimate thematic toolbox to look at the 8 essential elements. We're going to quickly run through the architecture of poetry, the sounds of rhyme and meter, the feelings of tone and mood, the words within diction and style, the structure of pattern and motif, and then finally, we'll put it all together.
All right, let's just dive straight into Section 1, the architecture of poetry.
Let's actually break down some of that terminology we totally take for granted. What even is poetry? At its core, poetry is a form of literature designed to convey messages, paint scenes, and express emotions, all carefully arranged to engage the reader's imagination. When we talk about a specific single instance of this art form, we call it a poem, and the writer who crafts that careful arrangement of words, that's the poet. It sounds simple, right? But keeping this fundamental goal in mind, engaging the imagination, is absolutely crucial to everything else we're about to discuss.
Okay, moving right along to our first set of tools in Section 2, the sounds, meaning rhyme and meter.
Now, rhyme is probably the absolute most famous element of poetry, right? It's that repetition of sound, usually found right at the ends of lines. If we jump back to Benedicto's poem, we have words like sea, beauty, sea, scenery. The poet is intentionally repeating that long E sound at the end of her lines. And this isn't just a happy accident. It creates a sort of musical echo that binds the whole stanza together. It makes the description of the natural landscape feel cohesive and honestly just really beautiful to the ear.
But here's the thing. Rhyme needs a heartbeat, and that sound is driven by meter and rhythm. Meter describes the rhythm in a line by combining the number of beats with the arrangement of stressed and non-stressed syllables. Rhythm is the actual pattern of that stress that establishes the pace. For instance, traditional Filipino poetic forms often use a really regular pattern where every single line has exactly 8 syllables. And what does that do? It creates a rhythmic, soothing pace that invites reflection. It's almost like the gentle, repetitive touch of the wind or waves crashing along a shore. It gives the lines a mathematical, predictable beat that our brains naturally just love to follow.
Which brings us to Section 3, the feelings, tone and mood. Now, these two get mixed up all the time by beginners. The crucial point here is the contrast. Tone is the author's output. It's their attitude toward the subject. Are they being calm, playful, angry, sarcastic? It's basically how the poet is speaking to you. Mood, on the other hand, is your intake as the reader. It's the emotional landscape or the atmosphere the poem creates for you. So a poem might have a sad, longing tone about lost memories fading in the dark, which in turn creates a deeply melancholy mood for you, the reader. Or actually, scratch that. Think of a tone focused on vigor and strength. That's going to create a highly optimistic and hopeful mood. Basically, tone is the delivery and mood is the destination.
All right, Section 4, the words, diction, and style. Let's see how those feelings are actually generated.
So diction, it's a fancy word, but it really just means the poet's deliberate, super careful word choice. But it is not just about picking a random big word out of a thesaurus. Diction combines denotation, which is the literal dictionary meaning of a word, with connotation, which is all the cultural or societal baggage and associations that word carries. For example, a poet might choose the phrase living trees to highlight the bitterness and sweetness of our memories. They aren't literally talking about botany here. They're using the cultural connotation of deep roots, survival, and shaded darkness to communicate a bittersweet feeling of love and loss. Literally every single word is chosen for maximum impact.
And all of that specific diction directly builds what we call the poem's style. Style refers to the overarching technical choices a poet makes to create meaning. We're talking punctuation, line length, subject matter, the whole shebang. Take this insanely famous excerpt from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. "Once upon a midnight dreary while I pondered weak and weary." See, he uses internal rhymes like dreary and weary, napping and tapping, but he has no definite overall rhyming scheme. His choice of archaic, spooky words creates his totally unique atmospheric signature. That overarching signature, that's his style.
Let's look at the underlying architecture in Section 5, the structure, meaning pattern and motif.
So pattern is basically the structural arrangement the poet forces onto the text. It provides an internal order and sometimes even an external shape that offers visual and rhythmic beauty to the literature. For example, a poet might decide to use an AABB rhyme scheme, where the first two lines end in matching sounds and the next two lines end in a totally different matching sound. Or they might enforce a strict syllable count, making absolutely sure every single line has exactly 10 syllables. This pattern gives the reader a really satisfying sense of predictability and order.
And tucked right inside that rigid pattern, we usually find the motif. A motif is a recurring image, idea, action, or sensory perception that carries major symbolic or thematic weight. You usually spot it through repetition, and it's there to help explain the central idea of the poem. For instance, a poet might repeatedly use natural elements, like a moon rising filled with sorrow, or the wind passing in the dark. By repeating these specific sensory perceptions of nature, the poet establishes a motif that symbolizes much deeper thematic ideas, like the heavy feeling of sorrow or the act of endlessly waiting for a lost love.
Okay, finally, Section 6, putting it all together.
Look, understanding these 8 essential elements is absolutely not just some boring academic exercise. It gives you a real, practical, measurable way to evaluate literature. You can literally take a poem analysis rubric and objectively score a piece from 1 to 4 by asking, does it have a clear, well-developed meaning and theme? Are the ideas logically organized so the poem flows effectively? Does it show excellent, deliberate use of the poetic elements we just talked about, like tone, rhyme, and diction? Is it creative? Having these 8 elements in your back pocket allows you to look at any piece of poetry and evaluate it clearly against this kind of rubric.
So, at the end of the day, why does mastering this thematic toolbox actually matter? Well, these elements, meter, rhythm, rhyme, diction, tone, mood, pattern, motif, and style, they are the literal gears that create meaningful expression and engage the imagination. For readers, understanding them allows for much deeper, way more rewarding literary analysis. You stop just reading the words and you start seeing the complex machinery working behind them. And for writers, these elements provide a proven, super effective framework for expressing your own ideas and emotions.
Which leaves us with this final thought for today. Now that you know exactly how all these invisible gears work together, how meter sets the pace, how diction shapes the tone, how motifs build themes, how might you use these elements to look at your own world poetically? Think of something truly meaningful to you right now. How will you use these 8 essential elements to express your own daily experiences and start writing your own story?